The White Paper, to which my noble friend the leader referred, states that the government will seek, and I quote, an ambitious and comprehensive free trade agreement and a new customs agreement with the European Union. It is right that we should offer this, complete free trade with no strings attached. But, my lords, it is unattainable. That being so, we should waste no time banging our heads against a brick wall. As soon as it is clear that, sadly, our European Union partners won't accept our offer, we should move on. There is nothing to be gained by protracted and doomed negotiations. The worst thing for British business and the British economy is prolonged uncertainty. Much of the confusion arises from the misconception that what we are about to embark on, once Article 50 has been triggered, is a trade negotiation. As seen by our opposite numbers across the Channel, and we don't, as some speakers have said, take enough account of that at the present time, it is nothing of the sort. If it were a trade agreement, like the trade agreements we are currently seeking with countries outside the EU, now that we are free to do so, success would be achieved by virtue of the mutual economic benefit that such agreements confer. But although there would indeed be mutual economic benefit in a trade agreement with the EU, that is not how they see it at all. For them, understandably, this is not about economics. It is a highly political divorce settlement. In many, probably most EU countries at the present time, the political establishment is preoccupied with the struggle against the rising popularity of Eurosceptic anti-establishment political movements, some of an unsavoury nature. Our European partners are quite clear that were the UK to secure a satisfactory agreement, this would give a huge boost to these movements. Indeed, the anti-establishment parties themselves openly recognise this. This is particularly the case in France, which I know best, where the Front National is riding high. But French fears will receive sympathy and support from Germany, not least because Alternative für Deutschland is on the rise. Although we may have friends in some of the other smaller member countries of the European Union, there is no way that the EU will collectively agree the sort of trade deal we are offering, not to mention the fact that in any event it would be vetoed by the European Parliament. In a nutshell, as the White Paper explicitly states, echoing the Prime Minister, and I quote again, no deal for the UK is better than a bad deal for the UK. But for the rest of the EU, or the majority of them, it is abundantly clear that no deal is better than a good deal, good, that is, for the UK. So the only common ground, and we have to be realistic, the only common ground, and thus the only practical outcome, is no trade deal. And that is no disaster, my lords. There is no greater nonsense than the claim that in the absence of a trade agreement with the EU, we shall be falling off a cliff edge. There is no cliff edge, for the simple reason that there is no cliff. Absent a trade agreement with the EU, we shall continue to trade with our former partners, but on WTO terms. Some noble lords may be unaware that the UK already does far more trade with the rest of the world than it does with the rest of the EU. And the gap is widening with every year that passes. And the overwhelming bulk of our trade with the rest of the world is on WTO terms. Moreover, the minor economic disadvantage of being outside the EU customs union and the so-called single market, a disadvantage which has already been mitigated by the fall in the sterling exchange rate, is greatly outweighed by the non-trade economic benefits of BREXIT. And first among these is the consequence of the promised Great Repeal Act, which will enable us to repeal or amend damaging EU regulations, which is of particular importance to our smaller businesses. The party opposite is concerned, I know, that this may adversely affect workers' rights. But less than 10% of the vast corpus of EU regulation concerns workers' rights. It is the other 90% plus which need to be judiciously culled. And then there is the substantial benefit of no longer being required to pay our massive net contribution of getting on for £10 billion a year into the EU coffers, a figure which, were we to have remained in the EU, would rise sharply in 2020 when the rebate secured by Margaret Thatcher comes to an end. Let me conclude with a brief word about this House, of which I've been a member for some 25 years. The amendments which have been tabled do not seek to amend the provisions of the bill, but to add to them substantively, and perhaps to delay the bill. In the unprecedented circumstances in which we find ourselves, I have to say that were the House to entertain any of these, it would have embarked on an ill-advised, improper, and fundamentally unconstitutional manoeuvre.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.